All right, everyone. Welcome back to another Productivity Like a Pro podcast episode with my dear friend Paco Cantero and our dear members inside the membership. I'm Tom Solid, and who cares? You will just get answers, right? But we have something exciting. Our book, our ICOR Journey book, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Isn't that amazing? We are really excited, and it's insane. It's just there for 3 days, and we already have 125 sales. This is insane. It's exponential, and this is good to see that people are buying it without even knowing what's in there. That shows the trust that you guys out there have in what we deliver. We are really grateful. Wow, Paco, it was a long journey to finish the book and get it to this point, but so proud, man.
Yeah, really happy about the end result. I hope that people, we have quite a few beta testers of the book, and I have to thank them all and also say that the feedback was amazing. I think that we really were able to nail down every single point related to ICOR to make people feel that it's really useful for their daily lives, their daily work life. And we are really happy. It's been quite painful. We're talking about a project that took 7 months. You know that we tend to recommend that projects should take only 3 months, but there are many times that things don't go as you may think. Through the way of creating this piece of content, we decided to put as much content as possible, and we thought that it was really worth it to increase the level and deepness of this piece of content, because it's something that it will be out there, and we wanted, especially for our members, to have something that they can quickly check it out. Everything is pretty well synthesized in just one piece of content that you can go through sequentially, and I think that that's quite interesting. Obviously, it's impossible to achieve the quantity of the content that we use inside our courses and all that stuff. But we think that this is a pretty complementary element that people will appreciate. And obviously, for those ones who have no clue about what ICOR is, I think that it's an amazing starting point, because it says it all, Then, as we always know, this is an endless process, and that's why you can go as deep as you want. But as a starting point, we think that it's well enough to get started, and then going through much deeper insights inside our courses, inner circle cohort, and all the products and services that we are offering. And that was our main purpose, and we are really delighted about the end product that we've been able to deliver.
Yeah, it is a really comprehensive book. It's not like that we are leaving out anything from the ICOR methodology. We go through every part that we have inside ICOR, productivity end to end. You will see everything there, what Paco means here when we go to the membership. Obviously, there will be videos and we will have implementation examples, and this goes beyond. But if you really want to have the Bible about our ICOR methodology there we have it now set in stone. The definitions of the wordings and concepts and workflows. And as Paco already said, it's a great way for people to follow up on the methods. When a busy professional needs to look up a concept or workflow, that's much easier. And as Volker in the chat already mentions, also with the Kindle version, we can highlight stuff to reader to distill it to Heptabase, for example, or Tana, or whatever you like, but you can highlight stuff. And this is just the beginning. There's also the question, will there be a hard copy? And even that we are the Paperless Movement, there will be hard copies. There will be hard copies and paperback versions if you want to have really a book in your shelf standing there or want to give this to somebody. Also available in this format.
Paperless Movement, your productivity, your way.
Now let's dive into the first question that we have today, because that's what we are here for. And the first question is about note-taking. So why should note-taking include both information and action items? And that's a good question, because the question first of all is, should a note itself, an individual one, contain both information and action items? And we see so many note-taking apps that provide also options to make action tracking in their task management capabilities. So look at Evernote, when they implemented now the tasks there. Or in Heptabase, you have also a task section there. There are so many tools. You even have ample notes that is just built around information and action. The key understanding, I think, from my perspective and what we see from the inner circle members that we are coaching there around this topic is you can leverage these functionalities inside the note-taking apps in order to quickly note down action items that you need to follow up with. But this only works if you have proper routines in place to process these action items in your actual action system. Because something we don't believe is that you are able to manage all your actions as a busy professional inside a note-taking app with the capabilities they provide you there, which is usually just a due date and maybe a prioritization or something like that. You need to have a proper task management tool or even a project management tool in order to clearly lay out all the priorities aligned with your goals and things like that. If you are not a busy professional juggling dozens of tasks daily, then this might work. Right? If you have more simple life, it's straightforward, what you have to do on a daily basis, well, this might work then for you to use just one tool for everything. But the majority of our members here, they have a much more complicated life. And that's why we don't believe in that everything can be managed inside note-taking app.
And we do think that the more you separate information and action, the better. Okay, talking about clarity and talking about getting things done. Okay, because the moment that you start mixing up information and action items, the things become chaotic. I think that we should have second natures, triggers, okay? That the moment that a thought quickly comes into our head, we need to think about, is it information, is it action? If possible, if it's an action, if possible, quickly store and capture it in your action system. And if there's no choice, okay, and you need to have to use your note-taking app, talking about information, well, you need to create a workflow that it's consistent so that you can handle perfectly any action inside your information system. Because if not, everything will be mixed up. And we have to say it out loud that usually note-taking apps, those that are pretty well focused on information, they are not good handling actions, okay? That doesn't mean that you cannot create actions inside of them. And that's a problem, okay? Because people then splitting the actions through the note-taking app, then the action system, it's chaotic. They don't know how to manage because they don't have that single source of truth, talking about information and action. And that's why Tom has referred to routines, because the moment that you create actions inside a note-taking app that you use for note-taking, I mean information management, then you should have a routine where you can go through, well, quickly, being able to search all those actions that you didn't process yet, and then start moving them to your action system. That is where you can create your priorities, your deadline, adding additional, because we have to think about something. The moment that an action system appears out of the blue, it's not easy to create it properly in the right system with the right information to give context, okay? Things that emerge out of the blue, unexpected things that appears on your way, you don't know if that affects your team, if that affects a certain project, if that's an idea that you should store in some other single source of truth to be processed later on. And it's by delaying that process part that you are able to end up with system that has everything in the right place, okay? And that's why we insist in this quick capture, but also have process behind so that everything ends up in the right place. And that's what routines allows you, okay? If you have a routine that go through that note-taking app, check all the action items that you haven't processed, and then create them properly in the right place, then is when your productivity system works pretty well, okay? And you don't get confused between information and action.
And what's important there's another example why we are advocates of inboxes in note-taking apps. Because when you meet somebody on the floor and they just tell you something that you quickly need to jot down, then you want to use a tool that allows you to quickly capture this. Maybe it's even a piece of paper, who knows? Without a routine to process this piece of paper into your final destination and then have there a proper structure in order to further process this, it's useless writing it up. There's the moment you end up with dozens of these pieces in the end of the day. You have to have a moment where you in a hectic situation and you are able to quickly capture, and then when you are back on your desk and you are calm to process whatever you captured throughout the day. And this makes it very powerful. But the problem for many people is then the moment they would sit down, they don't know where to move these things on because there are no other systems defined where these things should go. So the key takeaway is that for the question, why should note-taking include both information and action items, is that we consider writing down action items also as note-taking, but understanding the different types of information that you're capturing there. Maybe there's an action item appearing and you are able to quickly jot this down in Todoist. It ends up directly in your action system. Why would you need intermediate step to do that? But then again, if you do it in a note-taking app, you might have a lot more context around this action, what needs to be done. So therefore it might make sense to do it this way and then create a more detailed action later on. So there are many ways to approach this and many different situations where you will leverage this. The key is just to have the right systems in place that you process this into. If you want to force this into one single tool as your ultimate single source of truth, then at least inside this tool there should be some way where you have different areas in order to place the different information, leverage the information later on and the action items. So for example, in Notion or something like that, that's where you could build things up like this. But that's where we strongly believe that having specific tools that are dedicated to these specific things like action and information is much easier to handle than using highly flexible tool and try to set up everything yourself inside one tool.
I think that it's important to have in mind tools that you can use for quick capturing, one related to information and the one related to action, because the moment that anything emerges in your brain, you can quickly capture that element. That's why we use, for instance, for information Tana, because the moment that you capture something, because here we could go and keep going into many different workflows, because it depends. Are you on desktop or are you on the go? Do you want to capture it using your mobile or do you want to use it using your keyboard and your desktop computer? It depends. Are you in the middle of a meeting note or whatever? There are things, but to give people things that we consider that is useful, having a quick capture tool for action and another one for information, that's a first step to start splitting just from the starting point this process, okay? Because for instance, if I'm on the go and an action emerges that I need to do something, I quickly capture into Todoist. That goes into an inbox that I can perfectly process. So I just try to capture with as much data and information as possible and save it so that I get rid of it and I rest calm because I know that that will be processed later on. Exactly the same about information. Imagine that I came up with an idea for the business or whatever, or a post that I want, an article that I want to write later on. Well, I write an outline in Tana and send it to Tana using Tana Capture, because that goes into an inbox that I will process later on. So that I'm covered, okay? No matter if an information item or an action item pops up, I can quickly capture and then later on I will process. That's something different when I'm on desktop, okay? I use different workflows in that situation. But I think that having that approach of the moment that anything emerges, think about if it's action or information, I think it's a first step. And later on, you can choose and bet on the right tools that you may consider.
Yeah, and I think it's important to bring up what John is asking here in the chat. So he says, so the routine is a daily review of notes. And this is not what we mean by that. So the routine would actually say, for example, your afternoon routine would say, process the inbox in the app that you have the inbox in. In this example, what Paco brought up, Tana. All right. So during the day, he captured something through Tana Capture on mobile. It ends up in Tana inside the inbox, and he can be safe and sound because the moment he hits the afternoon routine, it will just trigger him to go to the inbox of Tana and process the items in the inbox. This doesn't necessarily mean to review the notes because they can be lengthy. So reading through all the thing would make no sense. It just means to process the note so it ends up in the position it should be. So for the article draft that he meant, he could now create an action item in the action system for this article to create. And this would be the starting point. It's just a context there to work on this article in more. Otherwise, you end up working too much and investing too much time inside the inbox while you're going through this. And this applies also to emails, where people get stuck the whole day working through their email inbox. Instead, these emails should be processed in a way that they end up in the right place so you don't forget about them. So if it is really an email that takes you, this will be an hour task, then it might make sense to move the email to an action system. But there might be an email that's less than 2 minutes. You directly process this inside the email, and that's how you can very quickly go through the email inbox, but always be safe and sound that you won't forget anything that you need to do. Again, and that's something we said previously, only if you have a proper system that you move the things out to. So if you don't have a proper action system that is under control, it makes no sense to send an email to an action system to increase the already infinite list of tasks that you have there. And that's where things start to crumble again.
Hey, enjoying the content so far? So how do you feel after seeing all this? Do you think your productivity system is at this level? Take our free 3-minute quiz to find out. Whether you struggle with note-taking, PKM, task or project management, or even workflow automation, we've got you covered. Depending on your results, you'll get a tailor-made free email course starting right after you finish the quiz that will instantly level up your productivity system with laser-focused, actionable advice. Click the link in the description below and unlock your full potential. And we are personally here to help you succeed. So let's ICOR together.
So in short, a routine just triggers you to work through this on a high level and not to go into each note, and because that should be an action item in itself to review a specific note and expand on a draft from the article, for example. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is, can a single source of truth work in highly dynamic work environments? And that's an interesting question because, again, it brings up again the misconception about what the single source of truth actually is. In ICOR, in the ICOR methodology, single source of truth is a core element, and that's why it's really important to understand what we mean by this. And it's not one single app where you have everything in there. A single source of truth, a single place where you know that a specific type of information will be stored only in this place, and it doesn't appear on other places. You could have a single source of truth for your action items, and you can have a single source of truth for your information. And the moment you work on an action item and you need some information relevant to this action item, you know in which single source of truth you need to look up the relevant information. That would be an example. But it's not only the tools. It could be inside the action item. A task itself could become a single source of truth for this task. So if I need to work on this task and I'm collecting information relevant to the task, I can add all this information inside the task. So it's everything at hand the moment I need to work on this task, which also means if I have a meeting talking about a task, I can open up the task and the decisions made about the task will go to the comments. Anything throughout the week people add goes to this task. So that becomes the single source of truth for everybody working on the task or want to be informed about the task to go to this task and get all the information needed.
Yes, I would like to add that here at the Paperless Movement, we don't think about work environment that is not highly dynamic, that is stressful, that is full of pressure. I mean, the most aggressive work environment that you can imagine is the one that we are facing every single day. That's why we delivered ICOR, okay, to bring a solution to that work environment, because the moment that you are working in a work environment that it's, well, calm, that you can do a project for 3 years and nobody will ask about it, well, for that, you don't need a productivity system in place, okay? You need a productivity system in place when you are, suffering all kinds of, of damages, okay? And that's what ICOR brings here. It brings the possibility that no matter how dynamic, how high the level of pressure you are suffering, okay, you are gonna be able to deal with it without any problem, okay, reducing the anxiety, reducing and eliminating the stress, and producing at your best without burning out, okay? That's the main purpose and mission of ICOR, and that's what we deliver, okay? So the single source of truth becomes an element that is crucial, okay? Following the previous example, for instance, imagine that situation, that scenario where I left my action item in my Todoist inbox and my information item in my Tena inbox, okay? The point is that that's for me an intermediate step, okay? I send the things to an inbox because I know that a routine will take care of it, okay? A routine is a container of tasks, okay? Of elements that I will follow and execute one by one, okay? So I got an item, for instance, inside one of my routines that say, check Todoist inbox, okay? So I go there and then I start processing the items. Imagine that action was that I wanted to, I don't know, quickly call someone related to a project. Then I think about the impact of that task and I think, no, this needs to go to this project. I need to create a task properly there with all the information, with a link to the client, whatever. The more context I add, the better I will execute the task. And if I need to delegate it, the recipient will have much more information so that he won't come back to me asking about additional information. That's the moment that that task that I've created related to this call becomes, it's in its single source of truth. That's the final destination. It's linked to the project. I added content. It's properly put in the right place so that everyone, even myself, can perfectly execute and complete it. Following the exact same example related to the Tena inbox, imagine that it was an idea about an article. Well, I can bring it to my PKM to develop. If I think that that makes sense, I will go into my project management system where we have one area, okay? One single source of truth that we call work streams, where we have different workflows. Each one represents one article in this case. So there I can create that action item that tells me that I need to create that article, write it, edit, publish it. And that's the single source of truth for that element that started as a thought that emerged out of the blue. I send it to my Tana inbox. I process it thanks to the routine. I create it properly in the final destination that is a task inside that work stream area where we store, in this case, all the articles, all the YouTube, all the podcast episodes. Okay, we have different elements, okay, containers to store this type of elements so that at any moment we can quickly go to that single source of truth, knowing that we will find there the right information with the right contents and with everything in place. So to end up, I will say that the moment that you perfectly control the concept of a single source of truth and you are able to implement it and you are able to use it daily without any friction is the moment that you can state that you have a productivity system in place that it won't fail. It's impossible to fail. You have seen this workflow that I have described. It's full of subtleties that I didn't mention to be much more simplistic, I would say. But at the end, everything works. That's perfectly internalized in our brains as a second nature, and we are constantly executing it. And that's how nothing gets lost and everything gets completed, you know? And that's the story behind this story.
Yeah, Volker says, yes, I can absolutely confirm this, Paco. Let's move on to the next question. Why is understanding the difference between core, satellite, and utility apps so vital? That's a very important question because I just today saw a comment on a YouTube video that said, I'm already having so many subscriptions and you're splitting out your information to 3 different tools and this could end up in that amount of money per month and so on. And well, my response below that was exactly what we will talk about now, because the problem really is that people spend a lot of money for a lot of tools per month without knowing why they use these tools. Once you understand why you're using the tool, you will understand the return of investment and you realize that $20 per month is nothing compared to what you're saving on time and therefore money on a daily basis. And if this is not the case, then you might have redundant tools. And that's where we have the ICOR framework in the ICOR methodology, where you can lay out your tools in order to quickly identify redundancies and gaps. Because looking at the Inner Circle program that we have with the Inner Circle members, in the first coaching session, we always go through their ICOR framework. So they bring their ICOR framework with all the tools that they are currently using, and we analyze them thoroughly in this first coaching session. And there's always a scenario where we see redundancies in one area, which is usually the personal knowledge management with a lot of different note-taking apps and things like that going on. And then a lack in the action system where there's a lack of a project management tool or task management tool or things like that. And then we also see another misconception there that people identify, for example, Google Calendar or the Outlook calendar, and they also use in addition Fantastical, for example. And they say these are two different calendars, while in fact, or two different tools, while in fact, and that's where we differentiate between core, satellite, and utility apps here. The core app in this example would be the calendar. So there's where your events go, people invite you through your Google Calendar, and so on. So the moment you kill this core app, this Google Calendar, you will no longer have access to your events and meetings and things like that. Fantastical, for example, or Vimcal, or I don't know, the Notion calendar and things like that are visualizing your Google Calendar events. Those are satellite apps. You can replace Fantastical very quickly with Vimcal and just visualize your existing events in a different way. But if you take away this tool, it doesn't destroy your overall productivity system. And another good example is here the email client. So you run on Outlook and then you get Superhuman, for example, or Spark email in order to work through your emails more efficiently. So in our case, it's Superhuman. There's no faster solution than this one. However, if Superhuman would shut down tomorrow, we would suffer from not having Superhuman and the workflows that we established with it. However, our emails will stay intact. So we still have our Google or Gmail account available. We can still have the archive of thousands of emails and years of emails available. And that's the difference between core and satellite app. By just understanding this, you realize already, let's focus on core apps when you think about pricing and get rid of all the noise around it with satellite apps if things are not working for you, and focus on your core apps and try to make them work as best as possible. Realize the ceiling that you're hitting, the friction points that you have, and those will tell you what satellite apps you're looking for to enhance the functionality of your core apps. And that's already a big one. And utility apps, maybe Paco, you want to talk about utility apps?
Yes, well, those are the apps that you use to enhance your system, but that they are independent. You know, this is perfectly represented in the ICOR framework. And we insist that understanding this difference between core, satellite, and utility is so crucial because we live it live on every Inner Circle cohort session that we do with people who join this program, because it's life-changing, because from that point you start approaching apps in a totally different way, because you know where that tool or application resonates, where the weaknesses of that application emerge. It's totally different, because instead of just going all in to the world of software and tools and applications, you go with synthesis of your needs that it's awesome, I would say, because right now you can perfectly define what you are missing, what you are duplicating. If you can use one tool instead of two, for instance, right now, talking about approaching tools and how the ICOR framework is so useful. Just this morning, Tom and myself were thinking about a tool. In this case, it was a utility app, okay? And the point is that, well, it was an interesting tool, really amazing. And the point is, well, that the price per month was a high tier. You know, people complain about $30 per month, and we were talking here about 170. So we were dealing with a subscription of more than $2,000 per year. So, well, and by looking at the ICOR framework and having an idea of our different applications and the items and things that each application covers, we ended up considering that application wasn't needed at all. And we concluded that we won't subscribe to that tool, because we had that framework. That's why we call it the ICOR framework, okay? Because it represents all the different possibilities, talking about information and action that you need to deal with. And from that point, it's perfectly clear that it's the thing that we have concluded. We can take that information out of this application, and this application. So this one, it's redundant in our system and we don't need it, okay? And that's something important. The moment that you know how to identify how a tool or an application is useful for, is the moment that you can really go in that reality of tools with a totally different approach. And I think that that's important, because if not, is the moment that you start with that one up for everything, or it's not clear if you need that app, what outcome you're going to get out of each application. And that's important, because the moment that you see that you don't get any outcome at all that is useful, well, you see things differently. And I think that that's one of the most important things, knowing the strength and weaknesses of that application and how an application fits into your system. Because the moment that you have certain areas that are perfectly covered, you don't need to worry about looking for an application to cover those needs. And I think that that's something that people are missing, the real needs that they have and that they need to cover.
To give a bit more context, what this was all about, it was a tool about visualization called Databox, and it's getting information from other tools in order to visualize it in a nice way. And that's a good example where if it is cheap, that might be useful. But at this price tag, we are talking about, it starts at 170 per month, and it depends on what you want to use there. And there you have to think about the value that you get out of this. What is the value creation out of this tool? The thing is, you could ask, why did you even think about it? Well, the initial idea was to save time, not to leverage manually the data from the different tools, but we realized doing it manually is not that time intense, then it would justify the payment of such a tool. And that's it. And that's something just to be easily realized within a agenda meeting that we have weekly, right? It was just one short point that we went through there and made a decision, an informed decision about will we keep the tool or not. We are always testing so many tools and see if we can replace anything that we have in place already. But in this case, again, it wasn't identified as a core app at all, because it just hooks in. It can be seen as a satellite app, as it is enhancing the visualization of other tools. But the pricing was not justified. So for the initial example where the person was complaining about, I'm already paying too many subscriptions, well, then go back and ask for each tool that you're using, what value is it actually providing to you on a daily basis by using it? And do you really leverage these tools in the best way possible? But I'm sure for most tool stacks that I go in and look it up, what tools they use, there are too many tools that don't really provide any value. They just look fancy, and that's recommended by some people, or the marketing on the website was amazing and that's the reason why you're using it, but maybe you just kill it. But I don't like this mindset in general. I'm already paying too many subscriptions for too many tools. I don't want to pay another subscription for another tool. Then don't do it, but be just sure for the subscriptions that you're already paying that it is worth paying. That's really something important to have a mindset change there. Okay, we come to our last question now. What if employees find the procedures too complex or time consuming? And here, this is referred to the standard operating procedures, for example, or work instructions and things like that. And that's something I personally was suffering in corporate, working big corporate in a very restrictive environment in pharma. The SOPs that I had to read and understand there were 70 plus pages long, and then hundreds of them. So how are you supposed to really keep these things in mind? And one of my tasks back then was simplifying these things. Nowadays, well, that's now 12 years ago in the meantime, but things evolved. And something I was pushing back then already was videos, for example, to very short videos that explain by showing how things are done in a better way. So if things are complicated, writing it in text can become very complicated to explain. So while a very short video might explain it in a much easier way and a time consuming to create. And another thing is, let the person who is responsible for this process create the procedure themselves. So if you hire somebody who needs to take over a task that you've been doing, but you never have written up anything, show them in a call exactly with a screen sharing, if it's something digital, for example, show them what this is. Everything is recorded. In the end, give the recording to this employee and let them create the work stream or the SOP out of this video. So this gives you two things. First, it saves you time to create the SOP yourself, and it gives you the opportunity to see if the person who watched you actually understood what you've been talking about. And that's a great starting point then for the SOP. And then you see the gaps where you might realize, oh, I forgot to mention this and things like that. And also gives the control over to the person who needs to carry out this later on. So you see if everything is understood.
Pragmatism. I think that the moment that you create procedures, SOPs or work instructions or whatever, that are useful for the people and easy to digest, there's no problem at all. Also, right now, I think that we are leveraging a lot and the artificial intelligence, talking about this type of systems, okay, where people can start asking the system and they receive specific replies, for instance. And the point is, what we do in the paperless movement as one of our core values, that is the no fluff approach and to the point approach. I think that especially the people who create these procedures should take advantage also themselves based on AI to synthesize the things, to cut things off, and trying to limit and restrict themselves to create something that it's easy to digest. If you need to go through an SOP that it's 100 pages written test with long paragraphs, without bullets, without bold, without videos, without anything at all, at the end, you're not achieving, because I think that the wrong approach is not having SOPs or procedures at all, okay, based on this approach that as people are not going to read it, then we don't do it, we don't update it. And I think that that's a big mistake, because we have tested that the moment that you have a specific procedure for certain things, everything is better executed. And the moment that, for instance, you need to delegate that task or business process, it's quite useful, okay? The amount of time that you are able to save based on giving to that person that procedure, I think that it's amazing. And that's when you see the ROI to the effort that you put into that piece of content that you synthesize, that you really distill to give just the essential elements that are useful for the reader and the people who will consume that information. I think that with that approach, all the SOPs and procedures are useful and a must in any business.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point there. Again, a misconception from people about AI, as there's no point in going to AI and saying, write me an SOP or about XY, right? About anything that you're working on. You will get a generic SOP. It might inspire you to write an SOP. Much more efficient, and that's how we leverage AI in many different ways. We will talk about this in more specific in other videos as well, how we leverage this. But here is a good example. So I mentioned the recording and giving it to the person later on. What you could do instead, record yourself, even 1 hour or longer, in very detail what you're doing there, even if it is you describing something, because sometimes it's easier, and then send it to AI and say, create me an SOP out of this. Now you provide the AI the specific context. AI, in addition, knows the general context about this topic around, and it will create an amazing, at least starting point for you to optimize the SOP, because you're still the expert understanding if this makes sense what the AI gives you there or not, but already enriched with your specific knowledge. And that's, for example, where we start leveraging our book now. We can feed AI with our book and ask specific questions around how we would solve this with ICOR. It's leveraging our knowledge that we created inside ClickUp. You have in the project management tool and our business knowledge management tool, we have the option to have documents marked as wikis, verified wikis. And therefore, I knows if we ask any questions to look into these wikis. Again, that's how you can start leveraging AI for SOPs. When your people inside ClickUp, your employees inside ClickUp have a specific question about how they do this, it will be aware of all the SOPs there and give you specific answers based on your knowledge. Or the tool that Paco mentioned. What is the tool, Paco, that you are leveraging in the other business?
Slide.
Slide.
SLIDE. ITE. And it's wonderful because also I think that when you are creating a description of a business process or whatever, you can force yourself to create a small pieces of content that create some other small pieces of content. So more or less you get like an index that someone can perfectly digest. And if they are interested in a certain topic, well, they link and they see that piece of content, but it's not something overwhelming for the people. And I think that the moment that these descriptions of business processes are not overwhelming, people consume them, they understand that is useful for them, for the daily task and how they work daily. And also it's beneficial also for the own creators. I mean, the people who create these processes, the moment that they need to update them and polish them, it's pretty easy to have everything up to date. So the moment that anyone goes to that VKM, that business knowledge management system, they find the right information. For instance, right now, by having that system up to date, that also these type of solutions and software are pretty useful because they take care about documents that are not used for a long time and then they automatically archive it. Well, they make a lot of that annoying thing about managing these volumes of information. And the beautiful thing is that when someone new goes into this PKM system, they find information that is useful. They avoid asking everywhere questions. And I think that it's a real benefit for everyone in the company. Okay. The newbie, for instance, don't feel that he's annoying. Okay. Other people and other coworkers, the ones who creates the content feel comfortable because they know that it's useful. Okay. And just by redirecting people to the right piece of content, they get the proper answer without wasting time. And they also understand that by putting the effort into just that piece of content, it will be just one time, not just repeating the exact same thing one day and the other. And I think that that's beautiful. But the point is that you have to have crystal clear your approach, and everyone, creators and consumers, should know how to tackle all this information, because if not, it becomes chaotic and not useful at all.
And that's the point where in ICOR, in the refine part, the R in ICOR, is where you learn exactly this. Usually people struggle to write an SOP because they are not even aware themselves how they do it on a daily basis. Too many times people start from scratch for the same task over and over again, for a recurring task over and over again. They always look up the information again, all these things. By simply following the refine part, the automation, like a pro course inside the ICOR journey, there you learn about how to lay out your business processes, and therefore understanding a workflow that you do on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis. It is really worth the time investment to lay out these things visually. So you really have the work stream there laying in front of you on a high level, and then you can zoom in and think about individual processes. And that's how we approach this as well. We sit down on a whiteboard, we lay this out, and then you have all the process steps in front of you, and then you can tackle everything one by one. And then you start writing the document, because many people try to make this directly in a document and write things down sequentially. But then you will lose the overview. If you're not using an outliner where you can move things around, this becomes very messy very quickly. That's why the visual tool here is very important. In this case, we are using Miro. And once you have this in place, it is so easy to create the SOPs out of it. Also, realize all the things that you do that could be delegated to other people or could be automated, and a lot of things come out of this exercise.
I would like to add something to finish the podcast episode, that it's normally when you do things properly using your common sense, I mean that it makes sense for you, the outcome should be worth it 100% of the times, because the moment that we dedicate time to thinking and do things properly, it's always worth it. Okay, it's not wasted time at all. And maybe it's a huge, immense amount of time at the beginning, but as time goes by, you will see that the return of investment is amazing. And also the probability of burning out, because the moment that you reply to the exact same question or the same process day by day, that's a friction point, that the moment that there's volume and a stressful environment, as we said at the beginning, that is the common environment that we deal with on a daily basis, these type of approaches reduce the type of friction that we suffer, because there's no friction at all.
Exactly. That's where many of our inner circle members joining us, they're very successful people, managers, top managers, leadership, and so on. But it always comes down to the problem is the scalability. Everything worked in a small scale when they started out, and they just doubled down on doing more of the same. And now they have all the friction and they're hitting a ceiling. And that's always amazing in the end of these cohorts to see this big revelation. All right, that's something somebody else can do. That's something I can automate. That's something I should never do again. And all these things by having this overview. And that's really amazing. All right, Mary is already saying, I'm looking forward to reducing a lot of self-inflicted friction during our time in the Inner Circle cohort in October.
And you will.
We cannot wait for you. Sorry?
And you will.
And you will, yeah, absolutely. We cannot wait to get this started in October, Mary. All right, everyone, that was it for today. And we will catch you guys up next week.
Okay, see you guys. Bye.